The betrayal of Earth began not with fire but with silence. It began with whispers in the grand chambers of the Council of Worlds, where alien voices spoke of suspicion and fear. They looked upon humanity not as an ally but as a rival, and those whispers soon grew into accusations. Humanity, they claimed, had violated treaties. Humanity, they claimed, had overstepped its reach. Humanity, they claimed, could not be trusted in the order of the stars. At first the people of Earth did not believe the Council would move against them, for humanity had bled alongside other species in wars. Against raiders and tyrants, humanity had shared its science, its trade, its culture. Humanity had stood in good faith, but the Council saw something else in the rise of Earth. They saw ambition, they saw strength that frightened them, and so they turned their unity not against chaos but against humanity's. Sanctions came first, cutting off trade and technology. Alien fleets began patrolling the edges of human space. They claimed it was for balance. They claimed it was for security, but the truth was clear. Earth was being strangled. Colonies that once thrived under commerce withered as supplies dwindled. Starships sat powerless without fuel. Cities dimmed their lights to conserve what little remained. Mothers held children who cried from hunger while fathers clenched fists in helpless rage. Earth sent envoys to the council halls hoping for reason, their words spoken in voices heavy with desperation. But those halls echoed with mockery. Alien delegates laughed and sneered, calling humanity reckless and dangerous. They turned their faces away from human pleas as if they were no more than insects buzzing at their feet. In that moment, the betrayal became undeniable. When the Council declared military restrictions, humanity was forbidden from building new ships or defending its own borders. Fleets of alien powers entered human colonies without resistance. They claimed to bring peace, but they brought occupation. They claimed to bring order, but they brought chains. Soldiers marched in streets that had once belonged to humanity, their banners rising above schools and markets as if to erase every memory of human pride. In the silence of occupied colonies, survivors whispered of missing families. Those who resisted disappeared into the void, taken as prisoners or slaves. Worlds that once sang with human voices were muted under the crushing heel of the Council. The betrayal cut deeper with every passing day until the wound became unbearably, and Earth itself. Leaders tried to calm their people, but the truth was plain. No council that betrayed so easily could ever again be trusted. No empire that mocked human suffering could ever again be called an ally. In the ashes of despair, a new fire began to kindle, for betrayal did not break humanity. It forged them together. It burned away their divisions and left only unity. As the stars above Earth shimmered with alien patrols and the blockade tightened, the people whispered in their homes, in their markets, in their shelters. They whispered of wrath, they whispered of vengeance, they whispered that one day the Council of Worlds would regret the betrayal they had unleashed upon humanity. The betrayal deepened when Earth gathered its last strength and sent diplomats once more into the shining chambers of the Council. The envoys came not with threats, but with pleas, their voices carrying the weight of starving colonies and broken families. Yet as they stood beneath the towering spires of alien architecture, they were met with ridicule. The delegates of the Council sat high upon their thrones, their jeweled garments glowing under the lights, and they looked down upon the humans with sneers of superiority. The lead envoy spoke of the suffering of Earth. He spoke of children without food, of cities without power, of colonies stripped of resources. He begged for fairness, for compassion, for justice, but the chamber erupted not in understanding but in cruel laughter. The sound carried across the vast hall, as if the stars themselves mocked humanity. One delegate declared that Earth was reckless, another called humanity too dangerous to be trusted with freedom, another suggested that humanity should be placed under permanent oversight and guardianship. The words cut deeper than any blade. Earth had fought side by side with some of these species. Earth had saved others from extinction, yet now the Council had twisted truth into lies. They painted humanity as a threat to peace, when it was only humanity that had been betrayed. When the envoys returned home, their faces were pale with shame and grief, and the people of Earth who listened to their reports felt something inside them break. The Council did not stop with humiliation. They moved forward with cruelty disguised as order. They passed decrees forbidding humanity from building ships larger than patrol craft. They forbade the construction of advanced weapons. They demanded full inspections of all human facilities, and they declared that any violation would be treated as rebellion. Enforcement fleets were dispatched to orbit human colonies, their ships casting shadows across skies once free. The occupations grew heavier with each passing day. Soldiers of alien empires marched through human streets, They raised banners that were not human. They patrolled markets and homes with weapons in hand. They dragged away those who resisted. Entire families disappeared. Without explanation, farms were stripped of food, factories seized and repurposed for the council, and the night whispers spread of transports filled with captives vanishing into the dark. Void children asked their parents why the council, who once promised peace, had now brought chains. Mothers and fathers had no answers. Their grief became silent rage. Communities that had once trusted in diplomacy now looked to the stars with eyes burning with fury. They remembered the laughter of the delegates. They remembered the sneers, the mockery, and they swore in whispers that would one day rise to shouts that humanity would not forgive on Earth. The blockade tightened. No supplies came through the skies. Above shimmered with alien fleets, and the people knew they were prisoners within their own world. Yet within that cage, unity began to form like iron hammered in fire. The betrayal that was meant to break humanity had instead bound them together into something stronger and darker, a single voice that spoke not of peace but of wrath, a voice that promised that the council would pay on Earth. The betrayal was like poison in the air, yet poison can become fire when it is transformed by rage. And that is what happened as the people looked around them and saw no nations, no borders, no divisions, only one truth, that they had been betrayed and humiliated as a species. Together the council had mocked them together. The fleets had occupied their colonies together. The aliens had laughed at their pleas, and so humanity discovered unity in the ashes of despair in the crowded streets of broken cities. Leaders who once fought each other now stood side by side. Generals and scientists, sworn enemies, now shook hands. Presidents and prime ministers and kings now spoke with one voice, because the council had left them no other choice. The council had turned humanity from rivals into brothers and sisters, from scattered voices into a single roar of defiance. People gathered in shelters and whispered, not of surrender but of vengeance. Parents told their children that mercy was over, and the children listened with wide eyes filled with the same burning anger. People who once argued over politics or borders now gave food to strangers and swore oaths to fight together for the survival of all humanity. They whispered in factories, in schools, in hidden places that the council would regret what they had done. The betrayal had cut so deep that it forged bonds stronger than blood. No colony was forgotten, no family abandoned. Every human heartbeat with the same rhythm of grief turned into fury. The memory of the laughter of the council became a blade sharper than steel. It cut away hesitation, it carved away doubt, until only resolve remained. In underground bunkers, secret councils of humans began to form. They were not official governments, but gatherings of minds and warriors. United by necessity, they shared knowledge, they shared plans, they shared visions of what humanity must become to survive. They knew they could not remain weak. They knew they could not wait for pity. They would build, they would rise, and they would strike back. Whispers grew into chants in the streets. People shouted not for nations but for Earth, not for flags, but for humanity. They demanded unity not as an option but as destiny. The betrayal had burned away hesitation and revealed what humanity truly was, when pressed to the edge, not a fractured collection of worlds, but a single force. And in the silence, after those shouts, when the stars above glowed with the cold light of alien fleets, the people of Earth began to prepare in their hearts and in their hidden places. They swore oaths of fire. They swore that they would rise from the ruins and answer betrayal not with surrender but with wrath. The council thought it had broken humanity, but all it had done was awaken a storm that would one day sweep across the stars. In the hidden places of Earth where the council could not see, a new fire began to burn. Scientists and engineers who once dreamed of peaceful exploration now turned their minds to war. They gathered in secret bunkers and abandoned facilities. Using scraps of stolen technology and forgotten machinery, they worked without rest, their hands building weapons, their minds fueled not by greed or glory but by betrayal and wrath. They built engines that burned brighter than anything the council had ever seen. They forged cannons designed to tear through shields thought unbreakable. They crafted armor that would turn human soldiers into walking fortresses. They whispered of ships that could cross light years faster than any alien vessel. They whispered of weapons that could split entire fleets in half with a single strike. The council believed humanity helpless, but in the shadows humanity became something new. Pilots trained in silence, their ships hidden in the black between stars. They flew drills in asteroid fields where council eyes could not follow, learning to strike fast and vanish like ghosts. They swore oaths before takeoff, their voices steady with rage. They swore to never retreat, They swore to never forget the laughter of the council soldiers trained in abandoned factories marching in the dark there. Boots echoing with the sound of defiance, they carried rifles forged from forbidden blueprints, and they carried anger sharper than any blade. Factories, once meant for trade, were repurposed for war. The clatter of machines filled the night as drones were assembled by the thousands. Tanks rolled off lines built in caverns deep beneath mountains. Mechs with glowing eyes stood silent like statues, waiting for the day they would be unleashed. The council saw a planet beaten into silence, but below that silence humanity prepared its answer. The leaders of Earth gave no speeches. They knew words could not feed the hungry or heal the broken, but they met with the engineers, with the generals, with the pilots, and they listened and they nodded and they promised that humanity would never bow again. Across every continent the whispers grew louder. We will rise, we will strike, we will make them remember every mother who had lost a child to starvation, every father who had buried family in the rubble, every orphan who had watched the fleets of the council blot out the stars, carried that memory like fire in their veins. And when the call came, they would fight not for conquest but for vengeance. The betrayal had turned them into soldiers. Long before the first weapon was fired, the council thought its restrictions had chained Earth, yet those chains had only taught humanity to fight harder, to adapt faster, to grow sharper than any enemy. The council believed itself untouchable, but humanity was no longer restrained, no longer divided, no longer blind. Humanity was building a storm in silence, and when it finally broke across the stars, no world would be ready. The first retaliation came not with warning but with thunder. One moment the galaxy believed humanity still broken, still starving, still crushed beneath the heel of the council, and in the next moment alien patrols vanished into silence, their fleets torn apart by weapons no one had ever seen before. The humans had struck from the shadows, and their fire burned hotter than any star. The first target was a blockade fleet surrounding a colony once human and now enslaved. The aliens believed themselves safe, their ships arranged in formation, their weapons trained outward, confident that Earth could not resist. Then came the storm from the void. Human warships emerged, engines blazing, cannons glowing, like sun's missiles streaking across the dark. The blockade had no chance. The first salvo shredded their shields, the second tore their hulls open, and in minutes the fleet was gone. In the colony below, enslaved humans looked to the skies and saw banners of Earth rising once more. They heard the thunder of ships and the roar of victory. They saw soldiers descend in armor, gleaming with vengeance, rifles in hand, blades strapped to their backs. They came, not as conquerors but as liberators, and their first words were simple: "You are free." The council tried to hide the loss, but whispers spread faster than their lies. Alien merchants carried stories of patrols that never returned, of colonies that fell back into human hands, of soldiers who fought with no hesitation, and fleets that struck like lightning. Whispers became rumors, rumors became fear. The humans were no longer victims, they were predators. The second strike came even faster. A fortress world believed invincible, its walls layered with shields, its skies filled with cannons, yet human fleets came from the dark, engines flaring and split the defenses apart, as if they were paper cannons that once humbled other empires, melted before human fire. Mechs and tanks stormed the ground, cutting through alien forces in waves. The fortress that had stood for centuries fell in hours. Prisoners were freed, thousands of them, their voices trembling as they told of years in chains, their eyes wide as they looked at the soldiers who had saved them, and saw not weakness, but fire. One of them whispered, "The humans have returned," and the words spread across the galaxy like wildfire in hidden chambers. The council shook with fear. They called for investigation. They called for meetings, but the truth was plain. Humanity had risen from the ashes. They had been broken and betrayed, yet they had forged themselves into something stronger, and now they had declared their answer in fire. For every battle won, the humans remembered the laughter in the council halls. For every fortress burned, they remembered the children who had starved. For every fleet shattered, they remembered the families lost in the darkness. Humanity fought not for conquest, not for glory, but for vengeance, and with every strike, the galaxy trembled, knowing this storm was only beginning. In the council chambers, fear spread like a sickness. The same delegates who once laughed at humanity now spoke in hushed voices, their arrogance broken, their confidence shattered. They demanded to know how humanity had built such fleets under the shadow of sanctions. They demanded to know how colonies had fallen so quickly. They demanded to know why no warning had come before the strikes. But the answers were clear. Humanity had been patient. Humanity had been silent. Humanity had waited, and now humanity had chosen fire. The council sent envoys pleading for negotiations. They dressed their words in promises of peace. They claimed misunderstandings had occurred. They spoke of unity and cooperation, but the envoys returned empty-handed, for humanity no longer spoke in the language of diplomacy. Humanity answered with silence, and in the silence came the roar of warships. Humanity did not negotiate. Humanity struck fleets, descended upon fortress worlds that the council once thought invincible. Their shields cracked, their cannons melted, their skies choked with smoke and fire. Soldiers stormed bunkers with rifles blazing in blades. Flashing tanks rolled across alien soil. Mechs tore down walls. Humanity advanced like a storm, unstoppable and merciless, each strike more precise, more devastating than the last. The council called upon its member worlds to rally, but fear gripped them. Many refused to send aid, remembering the colonies already burned by human fleets. Others sent forces only to see them cut down, their soldiers fleeing in panic. When they realized what they faced, the humans fought with a fury that could not be measured. Their rage turned into strength, their grief turned into steel. And occupied colonies, humanity struck with precision. Soldiers moved through streets once patrolled by aliens, their armor shining with vengeance. They freed captives, tore down banners of the council, and raised the flag of Earths. Survivors wept in the streets. Some fell to their knees, clutching the boots of soldiers, whispering words of gratitude. Others shouted with voices raw from years of silence. Humanity had returned, and the worlds that had been lost were now alive with fire and freedom. Reports spread across the galaxy, rumors of human fleets appearing out of the void with no warning, striking with precision and vanishing back into darkness. Alien merchants whispered of soldiers who did not retreat, who did not surrender, who fought as if death itself had been banished. Whispers became legends, legends became fear. Entire empires began to tremble at the sound of the name human. The council gathered again, desperate, their voices no longer filled with arrogance, but with panic. They shouted of survival, they argued of strategy, yet none could deny the truth. They had awakened a storm they could not contain. Humanity was no longer restrained. Humanity was no longer pleading. Humanity had become the vengeance of Earth, and the fire they had unleashed would not be stopped until every betrayal was answered in blood. And the Shalian armies rallied with desperation. They poured soldiers into the war zones. They filled the skies with fleets. They raised walls of steel and fire across their worlds, believing that overwhelming numbers would crush humanity, believing that sheer weight of force could smother the storm. Yet every defense broke before the wrath of Earth. The soldiers of the council fought with fear, while the soldiers of Earth fought with fury, and in that difference lay the outcome of every battle in one world. The council built lines of trenches stretching for miles, their skies filled with artillery, their mountains carved into fortresses. Humanity descended in silence, their ships burning through the atmosphere like falling stars. Cannons roared, the ground shook, and when the dust cleared, the trenches were emptied, the fortresses torn open, the defenders scattered in panic. The humans advanced without hesitation, each soldier moving like a blade, each step cutting deeper into the heart of the enemy. Orbit battles raged with fire and thunder. Alien fleets fired beams that lit the void with blazing light, but human ships cut through them with precision, engines flaring, cannons striking with terrifying accuracy. Alien admirals shouted orders in desperation, their voices breaking as their fleets dissolved before them. Ships once proud and mighty turned into wreckage, drifting cold and silent across the black, while human banners flew where no human banners had ever flown before. The whispers grew louder across the galaxy. Entire empires, once confident in the power of the council, now trembled. They spoke of human pilots who flew into enemy lines with no fear, human soldiers who marched through fire with no hesitation, fleets that appeared from the darkness like ghosts and vanished, leaving only ash and silence. The galaxy began to wonder if humanity had become more than mortal, if grief and wrath had turned them into something greater. The council tried to rally morale, but their soldiers knew the truth. Every order to hold the line was an order to die. Every fortress was only a temporary grave. Every fleet another sacrifice to the storm of Earth. Commanders saw the terror in their troops' eyes. They watched as soldiers fled before battles even began. They understood that humanity was not just winning battles. Humanity was breaking their will in the ground. Freed captives rose beside human soldiers, fighting with makeshift weapons, their anger no less fierce than the armies of Earth. They shouted with voices filled with rage, their cries echoing across battlefields. Entire populations rose in rebellion, fueled by the sight of human flags raised. Once again, the council lost more than armies. They lost the loyalty of the worlds they had once contended. In every battle, every victory, humanity remembered the laughter in the council halls, the sneers, the arrogance, the betrayal. Each strike was not only a weapon but a memory unleashed as fire, and the galaxy could see that this fury would not rest until the betrayal was drowned in blood and ash. Humanity pressed forward like an endless tide, and nothing stood against it for long. On Earth the people watched as the war spread across the stars, and for the first time since the betrayal hope burned brighter than despair. They saw their fleets return with victories. They saw their soldiers walk out of the fire unbroken. They saw colonies once enslaved now free, and their hearts filled with pride. But it was pride mixed with grief. For every battle one carried the memory of the fallen, and every victory was a requiem for the deadened. The cities once starved by blockade. Survivors gathered around broken screens and ancient radios, listening to the reports of liberation. Their cheers echoed through ruins, their voices rising like thunder across shattered streets. Children who had once cried from hunger now shouted with joy when they heard the names of freed colonies. Parents held them close with tears in their eyes, knowing that sacrifice had not been in vain. The council had tried to erase humanity, yet humanity had written its defiance across the galaxy. In fire, mothers who had buried their sons and daughters saw vengeance in every fleet, and though their hearts still ached, they stood taller. Fathers who had watched their families taken into chains heard the cries of rebellion on alien worlds and clenched their fists, not in despair but in resolve. Orphans who had been left with nothing grew strong with the knowledge that humanity fought not only for the living but for the memory of every soul stolen by betrayal. The leaders of Earth spoke little, for words were no longer needed. The victories themselves were the message. Humanity had risen, humanity had endured, humanity had become something that no betrayal could break. They did not speak of glory, they did not speak of conquest, they spoke only of survival and of justice, and every person who heard them felt the same fire in their own veins. Across the galaxy whispers grew louder. Entire empires that had once bowed to the council now looked to Earth with awe and fear. They saw a species once mocked as reckless now marching across the stars with precision. They saw fleets once forbidden now dominating the void. They saw soldiers once treated as weak now feared as unstoppable, and they began to understand that the council had unleashed something that could never be restrained again. The council itself was fracturing. Their meetings filled with shouting and panic, their members accusing each other of weakness, of cowardice. Some begged for surrender, others demanded more fleets, but all of them knew the truth. The humans would not stop, the humans would not forgive, the humans would not rest until the council was broken. The same way Earth had been broken, and on Earth itself, the survivors stood in the ruins of their old world, and for the first time in generations they felt no shame, no humiliation, no despair. They felt strength, they felt unity. They felt vengeance turned into pride. Humanity had carried its grief into the stars and forged it into wrath, and the galaxy trembled as the storm grew ever closer to the council itself. The council fortress world stood at the heart of the galaxy, its walls of steel and stone layered with defenses, its skies filled with fleets, its surface bristling with cannons. They had built it to be eternal. They had believed it would never fall, yet the storm of humanity had reached its gates, and the galaxy held its breath as the wrath of Earth descended. The human fleets came like fire streaking across the void, engines blazing their formation, perfect their weapons. Burning through the dark, the defenders opened fire beams, slicing the black missiles streaking across the stars. But the humans did not falter. Their shields burned but held, their cannons roared, and the first line of council ships vanished into silence. The second line tried to retreat, but human ships pursued them, tearing their hulls apart until wreckage filled the sky. The surface soldiers of the council manned the walls, their voices filled with fear. They had heard the stories of human soldiers who did not surrender, who did not retreat, who fought like wolves unleashed, and when the dropships broke through the clouds, they saw those stories come alive. Armored figures storming across the battlefield, rifles, blazing blades, flashing tanks, grinding over trenches, mechs towering above the smoke. The defenders fired in desperation, but their shots struck walls of steel and fury. The humans fought not as conquerors but as executioners, every strike precise, every movement filled with purpose. They remembered the betrayals, the hunger, the chains, the laughter in the council halls, and they unleashed all of it upon the enemy. The fortress walls crumbled, the cannons melted, the soldiers broke and fled, yet there was nowhere to run, for the storm of Earth was everywhere. Inside the council chambers, the delegates screamed at each other, panic filling their eyes. Some tried to flee on hidden ships, others begged for mercy, but it was too late. The doors shattered, and human soldiers entered with weapons, raised their armor, scarred their eyes, unyielding. The chamber that had once echoed with arrogance now fell silent under the shadow of wrath. The delegates pleaded, they promised peace, they promised surrender, but humanity did not come for promises, humanity came for justice. The executions were swift, the banners of the council torn down, the banners of earth raised high across the ruins, and the galaxy felt the weight of the moment. The betrayal had been avenged, the chains had been broken, the laughter silenced forever. Humanity had answered not with words but with fear. Across the stars the news spread, entire worlds erupted in rebellion, throwing off the chains of the council. Inspired by the vengeance of Earth, alien empires once silent now spoke with fear and respect. The galaxy had a new order, and it was forged in blood. On Earth survivors watched the skies and wept, not only with grief but with pride. The storm was over, and those scars would never fade. They knew one truth above all: the council had betrayed humanity, and humanity had answered with wrath, and now no power in the galaxy would ever forget the name of art.